From teen pregnancy lies to murder investigations and being framed up for murder out of revenge, this is the twisted case of 15-year-old Annie Kasperzak, who always dreamed of having a family of her own. On the other hand, when this lie spiraled out of control, she ran away but was found dead in a nearby lake, leading to a murder investigation that was full of twists and turns. What led to her death? And who could have murdered her? All these questions will be revealed in this mind-blowing case. Just stick around till the end to find out more. This is Unsolved Files, a unique channel where crime stories are being brought to your screen. What are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button for more intriguing and suspense-filled crime stories. Now let's get back into this story and uncover this twisted mystery. Grace Kasak, known as Annie, was born on January 10, 1997, into a dysfunctional, unstable, and abusive environment. Thus, she was placed in foster care. She had 9 returns by foster homes by the time she was 9 years old, which left her lacking trust and in need of a family and stable environment. Veronica Kasbach met Annie after her 9th family return. As Utah Children and Family Services caseworker, she found homes for homeless children. She cared about the kids she worked with and wanted them to have every opportunity in life. She had a close relationship with Annie because she saw everything Annie had gone through at such a young age, including abuse, and saw what a great kid Annie was. Veronica and Dennis, her husband, adopted Annie in January 2007 when Veronica was 6 months pregnant. After Annie was adopted, they had 2 kids and welcomed her wholeheartedly. Annie got her much-deserved home, parents, and 2 younger brothers who loved her and saw her as a cool older sister. A healthy partnership and co-parenting continued after Veronica and Dennis parted ways. Veronica remarried to James and moved to Riverton, Utah with their kids. James loved Annie like his own. Annie wanted to be a therapist because of her childhood experiences. She wanted to help other kids like her, like Veronica had. Meanwhile, Annie was beautiful, caring, and funny, and her mother, Veronica, said she had a large personality and never did anything small. If she loved something, she was all in it, and if she didn't, she hated it. It was an ordinary Saturday night at home. Veronica checked on Annie in her room after getting out of the shower and found her gone. Veronica contacted James, and they searched everywhere for Annie to see if she was hiding. James found a letter under Annie's bed blanket that said, "I'm sorry, Mom, I made a mistake. Sorry, I lied about a few things and must depart. I'm on my way to California when you read this." Veronica and James read this letter, and like any parent who freaks out and calls the police, they contacted Annie's friends and family to find out who she ran away with, as well as her boyfriend, Darwin Christopher Bagshaw. They met in math class and had an on and off romance for a year and a half. Annie was now smitten with him. Chris informs Veronica that he doesn't know where Annie is, but Annie tells him she's going to go away with LJ, which Veronica and James had never heard of. After this, the police arrive at the crack residence to collect a report, and James tracks Annie's phone. They watched Annie's phone move on the screen in real time. It was traveling swiftly, so she was probably in a car, but then the signal stopped. Veronica went with a photo of Annie to a Walmart near where the signal stopped and asked around if anybody had seen her daughter. Nobody did, so Veronica went home and kept calling Annie, but it went to voicemail. However, as they were hoping to reach her, the unthinkable occurred. They found a pool of blood and a red shoe. They called the police thinking it was animal blood, but they wanted to be sure, and thankfully, the police tested the blood and found it was human blood. Police immediately searched the water since there was blood in a shoe, implying a body. They searched on foot and with a helicopter for an hour. Sadly, the body of a girl was found floating in the river, trapped in trees, about a mile north of the shoe. She wore a red and white top and a red shoe, like the jogger found. When divers recovered her body, they identified that she had severe facial injuries, which indicated she had been battered and brutalized. Was Annie beaten to death? By whom and for what reason? Before we move further, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Unsolved Files, where we bring you deeper views of criminal, twisted, and unsolved cases. Please like, share, and comment on this video. Let us know what you think about it. Her autopsy result revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the face, since she had several forehead fractures and was unrecognizable. On the other hand, they had reported their daughter missing to the police before her body was found. Nevertheless, Annie had her gallbladder removed, leaving a scar. She wore braces, and DNA confirmed that the body was 15-year-old Annie Kasperzak. When a family member confirmed this identification, they reported that she was unrecognizable due to her severe facial injuries. Annie's chin dimple was the only reminder of the girl they lost. Annie's murder was investigated. They gathered information from Annie's friends and relatives. They looked in Annie's room for clues, and they found Annie's diary that had notes about her on and off boyfriend, Chris. She wrote that on her birthday, she wanted to be pregnant because she hadn't had a family for the first few years of her existence. She wrote in her diary on March 1st, 2012, that she was pregnant with Chris's baby. Nevertheless, an autopsy proved she was not pregnant. Veronica and James also told the police that they had spoken to Annie's boyfriend, Chris, who had told them Annie was running away with LJ. Naturally, the cops followed up on March 14th and interviewed Chris, her boyfriend. He was 14, and his dad, Darwin, attended the entire interview. Chris told investigators he slept with Annie just once, a week before her death. He knew about the reports that Annie was pregnant, but he didn't get her pregnant. It was probably LJ's. Chris said that 1 month earlier, Annie had told everyone that she was pregnant, and that she had slept with LJ, a 17-year-old bad boy, and had snuck him into her parents' house back in November. But she didn't want her parents to find out because LJ was 17. The police tried to gather additional information about LJ from Chris, but Chris has never spoken to him or seen him. All he knows about LJ is what Annie told him. Chris told the authorities that he last saw Annie on Wednesday or Thursday before her death, although they spoke on the phone on Saturday, the night Annie was murdered. Chris had an alibi for the murder night since his father, Darwin, and grandmother Wilma corroborated this. He also submitted a DNA sample and gave the police all of his Saturday night clothes and shoes for testing. He told the police that Annie had a nosebleed the last time he saw her, so his shoes might have blood on them. Spencer confirmed everything Chris mentioned regarding the nosebleed to the cops. The next day, March 15th, Chris's dad called the police to say LJ had driven past their house and was threatening to kill Chris, so the police think LJ was involved. And now he's threatening to kill more people. With this new knowledge about LJ, the police returned to the Kasperzak residence to search Annie's room and journal for evidence of his identity and complete name. They found a poem Annie wrote to LJ that addressed him by his full name, so police now know that LJ stands for Leighton Gendon, but they couldn't find him in any databases or police systems. The police conducted another press conference to find suspects or anyone with knowledge about LJ, who he was, and where he was. This news conference leads investigators to Joanna Franklin, a witness. She was arrested for fraud in West Jordan and claimed to know LJ, giving them their first description of him as no one had seen him, known him, or knew anything about him. Joanna said he was 19 years old, shorter than she was, Hispanic, but white, and she had seen Annie's murder and was willing to tell the police everything if they gave her immunity for her other crimes in West Jordan. The police agreed, and when detailing Annie's murder, she always calls her that girl, not Annie. She told the police she saw a young girl at the house twice, which belonged to drug dealer Daniel Ferry. He was a gangster. He had an extensive criminal background, so law enforcement knew him. And Joanna says a girl who looked like Annie was at his residence the night Annie was slain and that Annie brought LJ with her. Joanna claimed that she and LJ went into the bathroom to have sex on Saturday night before Annie was slain at Daniel's residence. Daniel, with a lustful eyes, asked the girl for sex as they returned to the guest room, but she laughed and answered no, so he grabbed the girl's head and rammed it into the wall so hard that blood splashed everywhere, including her nose, mouth, and ears. He then kicked her and yelled, "Don't laugh at me, idiot." Joanna says Daniel refused to let her check on the girl. "Grab me some towels instead of checking on her." She returned to the main room to find this girl unconscious, pallid, and breathing. Though she had a pulse, everyone thought she was dead. Daniel's only reason for potentially killing someone is that she laughed at me when LJ returned and recounted what occurred. After that, 3 men, Daniel, LJ, and B, carried this girl into the restroom and changed her clothes. According to Joanna, they dressed her in red and white shirts and red shoes. Joanna's description matched Annie's body-worn clothing. Daniel, LJ, and B covered the teenage girl in a blue shirt, put her in their white suburban car, and left. The police sought to confirm Joanna's story, so they spoke to other Daniel friends, who all said Daniel would never do this, especially after his sexual attempts were denied. Joanna asserts otherwise. She laughed at him and embarrassed him, not because she refused his sexual advances. Joanna also said Daniel's carpet had blood from this incident. Police searched Daniel Ferry's house with a warrant and discovered the flat carpet pulled up. The walls were recently painted, and the entire house seemed to be renovated, so a cover-up was clear. However, there were still red stains on a door and on the walls that looked like blood, and there was a massive head-shaped hole in one of the doors, so everything was adding up, including blood stains in his house, a cover-up, and a door that Annie's head could have been slammed into, just like Joanna claimed. The cops were convinced Joanna was telling the truth, and that Daniel Ferry was a narcotics dealer. Cops detained Daniel at a nearby apartment complex. He denied knowing what they were saying when they questioned him without a lawyer. The whole thing baffled him. He doesn't know who LJ or Annie was or what the police are telling him. The cops presented him with Annie's photo, but he named her Brittany. He claimed he could be anything but not a child killer. Joanna's testimony and his apartment's evident cover-up were available. Daniel was known as Joker and Little Joe, LJ, and they were having his apartment's bloodstains forensically investigated. However, the blood test showed that his apartment's stains were not blood. His phone records indicate he was in the center of the northern section of Salt Lake County the night of the crime, while Annie was slain and her body was located in the south. They found no evidence linking him to Annie's murder or Annie at all. After months, they uncovered no proof against him. He ended up in West Jordan on unrelated kidnapping and assault charges. He and his accomplice pleaded guilty, and they served time in prison. Joanna told the cops she made it up after being questioned. She devised a complex plan to frame Daniel for murder to avenge him for pulling her out of a contract. She realized that his sole alibi for Annie's death was that he was outperforming other kidnapping and assault, which Joanna told the police, but tried to pass off as Annie's murder. Instead, she thoroughly investigated Annie's case, including all the press stories, and changed aspects to make the police think she was talking about Annie's murder. She was trying to frame Daniel for murder to get back at him and win immunity for her crimes, which happened on the same night. Nevertheless, on March 3, 2013, the Draper Police Department publicly cleared Daniel of Annie's murder and started all over. The case changed hands several times, from Derek Johnson to Jacqueline Moore, and then Derek Johnson died in the line of duty. After stopping to rescue a stranded driver, he was shot and died, which was tragic. The Draper Police Department suffered greatly, and Annie's case was also affected because the case was handed over to a new detective, which made Annie's case slow down, something her family didn't want. To bring her case back into the public, they arranged a vigil, a press conference after 1-year anniversary of Annie's murder on the bridge, and a news conference to let people know her case was still unsolved. They wanted more leads for suspense and information, and they offered a prize. Since Detective Moore was the new detective, she had to review the whole case file, including all evidence, interviews, and searches to find missing information. She read Annie's diaries and discovered that she was obsessed with Chris. Her name was scribbled all over her diary, which is normal for a 15-year-old in a relationship or with a crush on a boy. But she also saw that Annie and Chris had sex just months before her death, after which she lied about being pregnant. Detective Moore believed Annie lied about being pregnant to keep Chris around because he didn't want her anymore. She also checks Annie's phone records from the night of the murder and finds several calls between Annie and Chris, and 3 calls from a blocked number, one at 6:01 p.m. for 19 minutes, another at 7:50 for 5 minutes, and the third at 7:58 for 4 minutes. Are you thinking like me? Could Chris have killed Annie? However, the phone company can still see who is making these banned number calls because the number is only blocked to the recipient. To find out, she contacts the phone provider, which reveals that Annie's boyfriend Chris made these blocked number calls, indicating that they were fighting the night of Annie's murder. So, Detective Moore checked Chris's phone records and found that his dad Darwin and Grandma Wilma had lied for him. The police were told that Chris had been at his grandma's house all night. He arrived at 7:45 p.m. and may have walked to a friend's house, but his friend wasn't there, so he came back home. His dad said he saw him asleep on his grandma's couch at 11:30 p.m. However, Chris's phone records revealed that his grandma contacted him many times around midnight, and then Chris called her at 12:47 a.m. Why call if he was sleeping on her couch? If they lived together, would they call each other even if he woke up? Why not walk up to him and talk with each other? It was obvious that they were covering up for him. Detective Moore wanted answers. She wants to know what they're hiding, so she reviewed Chris's police interviews and observed that his nosebleed narrative was altered to explain the blood on his shoes. At first, he indicated there would be 1 drop of blood on his shoes. Then, in a second interview, he said there would be 2, but the test showed many more. At one point, the detectives asked for his call logs because he received a strange text from Chris that read, "The cops might come back to your house. I need you to tell them that Annie got a bloody nose because she did, but you were laying down, and she got some on my shoe." Naturally, Investigator Moore interviews Spencer again, and he admits to lying to Chris 2 years earlier. He now tells her that he never saw the nosebleed, but believed Chris told him it occurred. Detective Moore questions more of Annie's friends and relatives, including Jackson. He gives them all the information they already know and tells a buddy she is pregnant, but when they ask him who LJ is, he says Annie always called Chris LJ. LJ, this guy they've been seeking, has always been Annie's boyfriend, Chris. Unfortunately, this does not prove Chris committed the murder. Detective Moore paid for a mobile phone tracing conference to learn more about cell phone data, and she also contacted Ray, a cell phone expert. who sent his crew and all his equipment to help. He examined 35,000 of Chris's calls and messages, but one from 9:01 p.m. on March 10, 2012, the night Annie was killed, stuck out. This call came from Annie's mother, Veronica. She called Chris, Annie's friends, and family since she had recovered the message in which Annie stated she was going to go away, and discovered that Annie had come to her that morning and told Veronica that Chris had asked her, "What would you do if I asked you to run away with me?" But to solve the case, they had to text, run, and called Christ first. When Chris received Veronica's call, his phone kept bouncing between 4 towers 25 times, meaning the signal strength from these 4 towers had to be so similar that it kept bouncing between them. Detective Moore and Ray drove around these 4 towers to find a point that would create this peculiar pattern of pings, and the only place it would happen was near the Jordan River, where Annie was murdered. Because of this, they were certain that Chris Bagshaw was near the Jordan River area, where Annie was murdered around 9:01 p.m. on March 10, 2012. Nevertheless, Detective Moore wanted to interview Chris about all of this, but Chris has moved to Grand Junction, Colorado to live with his mom. So they flew to Grand Junction, Colorado, and undercover officers approached him on his way to school and brought him in for questioning. Chris said, "I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer." And Detective Moore said, "Okay, well, we have a warrant for your arrest." He refused to talk to police when extradited to Utah in October 2014. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled for trial in March 2016. He would be tried as a juvenile and released 4 years after turning 21 if convicted. While in a juvenile detention institution awaiting trial, he told another inmate about Annie's death in horrific detail, and this inmate told the authorities everything Chris had said. Now, here is why he decided to take her life. Chris was unhappy that Annie was spreading reports that she was pregnant with his child. He believed she was. He wanted Annie to meet him near the Jordan River to run away because he didn't want the kid. Annie escaped her parents' home that night to meet him, where he repeatedly hit her in the face with a shovel until she was completely deformed. He then smashed Annie's face with the shovel until she died. After reviewing Annie's autopsy, the medical examiner found that her injuries matched the crime description. It was so cruel and intimate to murder someone over hearsay, and she wasn't even pregnant. Even if she was, there were other ways to settle it. She had so much potential, but she never got to build a family or become a therapist to help other youngsters like her. Chris's confession led to a move to try him as an adult, but he altered his plea a week before his trial. He seemed to change his mind and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. His counsel told the court that Chris wanted to accept responsibility. He pretended to be sorry at his sentencing hearing, but it's hard to believe.
I'm very sorry for everything that's happened, and I want to apologize to Annie's family.
He lied to everyone and the police for years until he was caught. He led cops on a wild goose hunt for a non-existent LJ. Now, Chris must serve 15 years in jail before being paroled in 2034. This is indeed a twisted case, and I honestly think he should never be released. But what do you think about this case? Let us know in the comment section below. How deep can satanic imprisonment be? Well, find out in our previous video, Teenager Imprisoned by Satanists, Real Crime. Go check it out now.